let's turn to this now. Continue our coverage on the much-anticipated elections on May 29th with a specific focus on youth participation during the last month's voter registration drive. The IEC says between the ages of 16 and 29, those made up a good 78% of new registrations. Let's discuss this. We have with us CFF student commander Bukisa Boniswa, NC Youth League spokesperson Fasiha Hassan, Dear Youth Federal Chairperson Ndipiwe Olayi, as well as IFP Youth Brigade Gauteng Chair Dalsy. Manganyi. Good to have you all, and thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for having us.
Right, let's start with you, Ndipiwe, online. There is, of course, evidence to support now that young people would have gone out in their numbers to register, but it does not necessarily guarantee that on the day of elections they'll show up, because there are various reasons that could have got them to register. There could have been a promise of movie tickets, promise of concert tickets, and all sorts of other incentives that people would have used to get them to go and register. What are the reasons in the past that you think would have led to low turnout at the polls, not necessarily at registration, among South African youth?
Thank you very much. Good evening to you, as well as to your listeners. As we are aware, there are indeed a number of young people that came out to register to vote in this election cycle, which is indeed quite exciting. And for us as the Democratic Alliance Youth, we'd like to attribute that to the fact that with us in our part, we tailor-made a lot of policies and made it more appealing for young people to come out and register to vote for the DA. But above and beyond that, the political landscape, young people fully understand that the time has come for us to take the opportunity into our hands to determine our own future, ensure that going forward we're part of the decision-making process, and to be able to create an inclusive society where young people are participants instead of just hanging around for the ride. We understand that in the past, young people were excluded and perhaps disenfranchised and not wanting to participate for a number of reasons, Thabo, to be honest, including they felt like they were not heard, they're not listened to, nor would their vote matter. But we can see where there aren't any, where there's difference in governance, where the national government is not ruling. Like, for example, in the Western Cape, that there is incentives for young people to come out to vote. Besides, of course, the political gimmicks that are offered out there. But incentives like job creation, incentives like service delivery, basic service delivery, incentives like getting the job done with capable people in positions to ensure that the proper life and a life that young people deserve is indeed attainable in a state of good governance. And I feel like this is the best incentive any young people should have to actually turn out and come out on election day to participate in this democratic right of theirs, to vote for government into the national elections that will represent their interests, and above and beyond that, to deliver services and not just political gimmicks. Thank you very much.
All right, Ndipiwe, a bit worried about your connection there. Hopefully they can try and establish a little bit of a better connection so we can hear you clearly. But let me come into the studio. Bukisa, let's come to you. I mean, concrete action, in a sense, that you say you would have taken as the EFF. Generally, you are a youthful party, but to actually galvanize young people and get them energized to actually go and register.
I think possibly the one thing that the EFF, I think, has gotten right is that we've tried to mobilize students in different spheres, right? So you have young people that are in universities, young people that are still in high school and stuff like that. So the EFF had a number of programs that youth really enjoy. So I think through those programs, we not only focused on only the social aspect, but we also brought to the fore the political aspect that is important to these elections. Because 2024 marks 30 years of democracy, and I think for youth it's very important to reflect back from the 30 years that we've had of this democracy, and also to think forward in terms of what do we want South Africa to look like? What do we want as the youth in South Africa? What is important to us? And I think the youth has been engaged with those questions, and I think even with consultative processes that we had in terms of our manifesto and how we drafted our manifesto, we went to young people and we asked young people, what is it that you would want to see in this country? We engaged different sectors. We engaged the higher education sector. We engaged the youth in different sectors, so high school and so forth. So we did a lot of work to try to consult with our constituencies to find out, okay, fine, we as the EFF think this is what's important, but how do you feel about what we think is important? And I think that's what the EFF got right, and that's why we'll continue having majority of our voters being youth.
Yeah. Fasiha, policymakers, have they done enough, not even to prepare, but to actually engage young people for the 2024 elections in terms of policies that have been put out there to address them specifically?
Let me start by saying something that's very important. The fact of the matter is that we've seen a huge amount of young people register to vote for this particular election, and that is a huge victory across political lines, because it's something my colleagues on this call and so many young South Africans have been working towards, and it goes beyond that, and you said it in your opening. Apart from registering to vote, you must actually vote. There can be discussions about who, what, where, how, but must actually vote. On the question of whether policymakers are doing enough in terms of not just policy, but I would also say implementation, there's a great deal of work. Look, we have a President Cyril Ramaphosa, whose big process is around the presidential youth stimulus. We've given 1.7 million opportunities, particularly to young people, various sectors around education, agriculture. But the reality is we need to do more. And there's nobody who's running away from that. In fact, this past weekend, the ANC launched its manifesto in a highly successful rally at Moses Mabhida. And one of the big things that came out of that is the fact that we need to do more around that process. We need to reindustrialize. We need to focus on the agricultural sector. We need to focus on manufacturing. And we need to focus on small things, even like the removal of entry-level experience, for entry-level jobs, rather. Yeah. That's been a big victory. But what do we do to bridge the skills mismatch, for example? What do we do to support young people in terms of black tax when they get their first job? Yeah. This is a far more holistic, I'd say, and a far more sort of all-encompassing process that needs to happen. So we need to take those steps forward.
One could say the ones that you're talking about that would definitely show up are the so-called Tinswalos, who clearly have benefited, and they see the benefit where they are sitting. But that's not a majority of them. You've got a whole lot more millions who are out of that 1.7 million that you're talking about, that feel that we are not adequately engaged by what you're saying.
Tinswala is a metaphor, and it's a metaphor for the 30 years that we've experienced. There's nobody in the country who can truly say that nothing has been done over the last 30 years. From social grants to no-fee paying schools, to school nutrition programs, scholar transport, NSFAS and all of its flaws, which we will openly admit to and deal with. We still have more access to opportunities than we did in 1994 and prior. But is it enough? And I don't think that it will ever be enough until we have a systematic process that we change. But to say that nothing's been done, to say that there are millions who are left out is partially true, but also in some ways there have been touch points with the state in which it has benefited people in their lives. To say that there is nothing that's been done, I think, is a little bit unfair. But beyond that, let's look at the big issues, right? Let's look at electricity. Let's look at unemployment. Let's look at, for example, water crisis. Those are things that we need to be doing more. And in fact, on the green economy, here's a huge opportunity for us to solve the load shedding crisis, but at the same time put young people forward. All of the solar panels that are coming and the focus on renewable energy, a lot of those things are being imported. Yeah. We need young people who are going to have those skills, and there is a focus on this. Not just about installing these solar panels, we need to be at every level of the beneficiation process. Yeah. The Youth League this weekend has also called in the same way on mineral resources, that we as young South Africans need to be fundamentally involved in that beneficiation, because we want young people to not just have jobs, but have a long-term livelihood. Yeah,
we'll come back to that and we'll challenge a little bit of what you're saying. Dalsy, let's bring you in here in terms of activity and in terms of a movement. Good news is young people went out and registered in their numbers. But, of course, the rurality of young people also is a major factor in bringing them in and them having a sense that they are truly being represented. How did you strike that balance in the IFP?
Thank you very much for the question. Good evening, viewers and colleagues. In the IFP, for an example, in the last election, we had about 33% representation of councillors in the local election. So in that way, we are able to give young people confidence that when they vote for the IFP, IFP would ensure that young people are fairly represented in government institutions. And also, the other thing is that I don't think that it's really fair that we as the organizations should give incentives in order to boost the morale of young people to go out and vote. Young people are angry enough to want to decide to want to change the government of the day. For an example, we've got government institutions that are failing young people. We've got your NYDA that only benefits the few. We've got your NFSAS that is in the brink of collapse. And young people are very unhappy about the things that are happening currently in the country. So young people are angry enough. We don't really need to convince them. We as the Youth Brigade, while we were busy with the registrations, it was quite surprising that we've got young people in their early 30s that have only registered or that have never voted. So this tells you that the young people are aware that it's all in their hand and it is them that must stand up for change.
On youth participation in the upcoming elections, and you're weighing in tonight, 072-110-5584. Bukisa, representing the Economic Freedom Fighter Student Command, Fasiha, with the ANC Youth League, and Ndipiwe with the DA Youth Federal Chairperson. He is with the DA, and Dalsy with the IFP Youth Brigade. Ndipiwe, let's come back to you. There's a huge gap between the young people who are educated, who have degrees, to young people who didn't make it to those levels of education when it comes to their engagement with the electoral process. And the critique that would be given to the Democratic Alliance is that you would be promoting your policies to a particular segment of the youth that might not necessarily be relevant to another that is previously disadvantaged in that sense.
Thank you for the question. I would like to dispel that notion. To be very honest with you, if we look where we do govern as a Democratic Alliance and where we do govern well, there's job opportunities for all people from all walks of life. And that's why also one of our apex priorities is to ensure that we uplift primary education to such a status that where schoolgoers are able to read and write with comprehension. This will capacitate them enough to be able to go through the process of their schooling, to be able to get to a point where they either go to technicons or training facilities, or they go to universities. But also I would like to indicate the fact that within the Western Cape, and particularly the city of Cape Town, 363,000 of those jobs were created since 2021. Not all of these jobs needed high skill, but some of them also required middle-level skills and even low-level skills. So the notion that the Democratic Alliance only attracts the few of individuals that are educated or only get formal education in the set of a degree or further education, I'd like to dispel that notion. The Democratic Alliance attracts people from all walks of life. For example, in the city of Cape Town, where we've invested over 3 billion rand in informal settlements to uplift informal settlements. And these are the type of measures that the Democratic puts in place where we do govern to cater for people from all walk of life, not individuals, not just for a select few of people. Where we do govern, we prioritize our budget to assist the people that are previously disadvantaged. But above and beyond that, we introduce models like the proposed alternative model, NSFAS funding, which caters to low-income households substantially, and above and beyond that caters to the missing middle for the loan schemes, and also to incentivize people to perform well with schooling careers that we can turn into grants. And I'd just like to correct, when we speak about incentivizing young people to participate in the creative process of voting, the incentive should be service delivery, nothing else but service delivery, tangible delivery, where young people can see and have a better life to live. And this is the offer of the Democratic Alliance, and this is what you get where we do govern. Right. Yes, we still a lot to be done, but the Democratic Alliance in the Western Cape and our municipalities, we do govern, we govern well. Thank you.
Bukisa, from a policy and a practice point of view, so a party like the DA can count and say, well, in the Western Cape where we govern, right, we have evidence of having applied our policies
Sure.
to an extent, and they've come back with the result through our implementation. How do you approach that? Because, I mean, okay, you are in some municipalities, but your record of governance has, in other instances, not been evidence-based and has not really been put in practice.
Firstly, I'd argue the point of if our record of governance hasn't necessarily been put in place, because when you look at, for instance, areas that we do have governance, so we have a number of MMCs, rather, the city of Johannesburg. An example would be the MMC of Health and the programs that she's been implementing in her scope, like programs about sexual reproductive health, programs about just general basic health care. You can see that even with an EFF government on those levels, EFF cadres are willing to be on the ground and actually work and actually educate also South Africans in terms of how do you access different services that are provided by the government. But I think when it comes to the youth question in terms of policy and so forth, the EFF aims to have at least 40% of the youth that's given jobs in government institutions and anything that is state-owned, right? So that what this would create is that you would ensure that you have a transfer of skills between people that have been in those departments, and therefore you're including youth in these departments, because it's the youth that are really going to be coming up with innovative solutions to the issues that we face as a country. And above that, the EFF is also aiming to ensure that in order for us to actually encourage the youth to find jobs, right, and encourage the youth to actually look for jobs, we're going to be establishing a youth employment youth employment fund where youth that are seeking jobs and so forth are going to then be helped. Because what you have in South Africa is that majority of the youth, so when you look at someone from Soweto, for instance, they don't have the money to go to look for jobs to even begin with. So you need to then look at, okay, fine, do we give people enough support to even get them on the table, to even be there to get their CVs to those particular jobs? And what you find in South Africa currently is that that's non-existent. So you need to have some form of policy that will enable the youth to actually go out there and look for jobs, because most of the time what is looked at and what youth is framed as is that the youth is just lazy and they don't want to go find work. But you need to also take into consideration what are the reasons for the youth for not being able to look for jobs. And on top of that, we're also looking at having a youth scheme. So a youth, it's a youth loan, youth loan scheme, right, where you would have that the scheme would employ, or not employ rather, but this scheme would ensure that youth that is trying to be entrepreneurs and so forth is given an opportunity to actually spread their wings and not necessarily have to worry about funding and so forth. So I think the EFF has so many creative ideas in terms of how do you actually get the youth to participate in the economy, how do you get them to participate in government agencies and departments, and actually provide insightful... Explain that to me a little bit,
maybe I'm misunderstanding you. So
Sure.
You're saying that you have a program where you want to go, are you going to go collect the CVs of the young people and take them to where they need to apply? How exactly are you
So, for instance, this would operate like a grant, right? So for youth that is looking for jobs and stuff like that, they would get then a grant that would enable them to travel, enable them to actually have the resources that would be needed for someone that's looking for employment. So when you're looking at, for instance, even the impact of apartheid spatial planning and how far black people are from areas of economic opportunity, that's something that's very important to consider. Because if you fail to consider that, you'll be making sure that youth stays in the peripheries and they don't actually come into areas like the city of Johannesburg and stuff like that, or Sandton, to get these opportunities. So you need to take into consideration that the youth in South Africa, especially the black youth, is very far from areas of economic opportunity. And also, they also need to, on the same breath, provide for their families. And if then you're going to be saying that you want to provide employment for the youth, you need to consider every other socio-economic factor that might not enable them to do that.
You have a government now that says, well, of late, at least since 2020, we are giving them SRD grants, and that some are using certainly to do that, to travel around, to print, to go to places where they can be interviewed and apply for jobs.
But do you genuinely think that is enough? Do you think the grant that's been given right now is enough? Like, I mean, 350. So, for instance, if you're traveling from Soweto to the city of Johannesburg, that 350 won't even last you a week of travel. So we don't think that's enough. And I think as the government of the EFF, we know these lived conditions and we can understand that, okay, fine, what the current government is doing is simply not enough, right? They don't also consider the things like what you would need if you are employed, right? So if you're employed and you're sitting and you're in an internship, for instance, an internship would pay you around 3,500, right? That alone is just transport money. Added to that, and we know the lived conditions of the black youth in this country, is that most of the time they need to take care of their families.
Yeah.
You can't take care of your family with that amount of money because that money would just be allocated to transport. On top of that, we would also have to ensure that you are self-sufficient. So at work, you don't have any food to eat, and that's just an important factor to consider. Because if you want people to be retained at work and you want people to be effective, those are the things that you need to consider. Yeah. And the current government is simply not doing that.
So some systemic deficiencies in some of the programs that require a structural shift, but not only that, a cash injection and a change in how you are approaching this and certainly expanding it to a younger voter.
100%. There's three main things that we need to look at here when we especially looking at youth unemployment. So many people want to just focus and say it's only youth unemployment and, you know, if we could just solve it like that, we would have. You're quite right, it's systematic. One of the first things we need to do is create energy stability. We need to create a logistics sector that is in fact functional and is able to move goods from point A to point B. And I don't just mean this in terms of import and export. The other thing that we need to do is link those two things specifically to economic growth. We're in a very unique situation, and I think the ANC understands that, in which we have millions of young people who are not just, you know, this idea that youth are apathetic. I think it's nonsense. I don't think that youth are apathetic at all. Young people are actively trying to not only look for jobs. If you look at service delivery issues, if you look at community activists, if you look at community organizing, it's all mostly led by young people. And so we're in a unique situation in which, yes, there might be a grant. I still think it's a huge, huge, huge opportunity to at least have something. 0 versus 350. You'll take 350. Is it enough? I agree. We need more. And the Youth League is actively calling for more than just a grant because we want those systemic changes. I spoke earlier about the opportunities that are there, but it's around linking the education sector, one of which is that skills mismatch, like I said, about providing more funding towards those drivers of the economy. We're educating a lot of psychologists.
They are rejecting that thing completely.
On NASFIS.
No, of the skills mismatch. They are rejecting it completely, but there is no such. The problem is there's just no work.
I think it's a combination.
The economy is just so bad.
I think it's a combination
of
things.
No work.
I think it's a combination of it, right? That's what I was saying. It's no one thing that's going to solve youth unemployment. We need to have a multi-pronged approach. We need to hit this from many different angles. We have young people who have matric who aren't able to enter into other accesses of opportunities. How do we get them into TVET colleges on vocational training? What do we do with young people who are graduates who also can't find jobs? You know, so there's a number of things that need to happen. But I want to address one quick thing that the DA spoke to, as if the Western Cape is this perfect case study. The reality is the DA-led Western Cape government works for some and works for very few. And the honest truth is it's not working for the black majority. If we go into a Khayelitsha, if we go into a Mitchell's Plain, and we actually see what kind of service delivery there is none. So this idea that they're actively delivering is nonsense. They're actively delivering for a white minority. And unfortunately, none of that has changed. At least with the ANC and other progressive organizations, there's an acknowledgement that there have been difficulties and challenges. These are the things we want to do. The president spoke to them over the weekend of what we want to do to bridge that gap. But at least we are pro-transformation. At least we actively want to change, number one, the economy, number two, society. Because we can't undo the effects of apartheid and colonialism in nearly 30 years. Not that we were going to do it in such a short period of time, sure. But the reality is there are policies that mean a lot to the people of this country. And this idea that BEE must be removed is also a very huge problem. How are young black youth-owned SMMEs meant to get the kind of support they need? Because if you put them up against a white firm, and this might sound very unpopular, but it's true, they don't have the kind of funding, they don't have the kind of social capital, they don't have the kind of access to market that the other company does have. So this idea that we mustn't intervene as the state is a fallacy, it's nonsense. You must have an ANC-led government that says, what are we doing to support all of these different SMMEs, youth-owned, women-owned? And also another important one, the list process of the ANC going into this 2024 election. The guidelines are so clear. At least every third or fourth person must be young, under the age of 35. Every second person must be a woman. We've gone through an extensive interview process with skills and qualifications. We're currently being vetted right now. So the ANC is hearing, we're listening. Have we managed to meet all the targets? We'll be honest, we haven't yet. But we want to be given the opportunity to continue to do so, because there's still a better chance for the masses of our country to have a better life with the ANC than with an alternative.
Dalsy, the party that you represent is in a multi-party charter for South Africa. What do young people feel about coalitions going forward at a national, at a provincial level, having witnessed what happens at a local level?
Oh, sorry about that. We, as the young people of the IFP, we do have confidence in the coalitions. Yes, we still have challenges because everyone is trying to figure out what is what. And also there are challenges here and there, but we do have confidence that that would work at the provincial and also at the national level. You see, as different political parties, we come with our ideologies and also our beliefs, different beliefs. Organizational cultures also come into play. But however, we will not divorce our identities as much as we will come together for a common cause, which is service delivery and ensuring that South Africa is served properly the way it deserves to be. Hence, we are advocating for coalitions in the provincial and national level, never minding what is happening at local levels, and that 1 minute we've got this mayor and the next we have the other ones. We still have much confidence in coalitions and we believe that they would work at the provincial and also at the national level. And if there are lessons to be learned, we have learned them. If there are mistakes to be fixed, we would fix them. Thank you.
Yeah. Bukisa, how do you feel about that? I mean, Floyd says you guys are going to either be number one or number two at this particular point. That's what he says. And if you are number two, of course, in order for you to govern, you would need to be in a coalition somewhere.
I think the mandate for all other political parties at this point is to just keep the ANC out of power, because it has proven itself over the 30 years of democracy that, in fact, it really can't deliver. So I think possibly, I'm sure that we're probably going to be number one. But if we're not, I really think that South Africans stand to gain more if the ANC is completely out of power and we completely shut them out, because I really think that I believe in the new ideas that the EFF has. And I think if then the EFF has majority, or second majority that is, we can advance these ideas. And I don't think we can do it through the ANC, because we've seen with previous coalitions with the ANC, it doesn't work. So I don't think any other political party that would be thinking about coalitions, I don't think the ANC should be a choice. I think shut the ANC out.
Yeah. In any coalition, it's a tussle for power.
Yeah.
Whether it's the EFF being with the Action SA or with Patriotic Alliance or with any of those, it would still be a tussle for power.
But I really believe in what the EFF has to implement, right? And I don't think there is any political party in South Africa right now, even when you're looking at the manifestos and you're looking at how in-depth the manifestos go in terms of the different sectors in society. So the EFF's manifesto is the only manifesto that speaks on gender, the only manifesto that speaks on LGBTQIA plus rights. It's the only manifesto that actually speaks to the youth. It's the only manifesto that speaks to literally every sector in the country. So then I think Fasiha is a bit triggered right now, but that's okay. I think it's very important for the youth to engage all of these manifestos, and you will see which political party actually took time to consult with different sectors, consult with different constituencies, to find out what the youth, what the citizens of this country want. And no other political party has done the political work, unfortunately.
Okay,
and Fasiha might be triggered because they've been here for 30 years.
Let me give you a chance to respond. Quick 2 minutes and then
quick 2 things. It's very interesting. The ANC's manifesto is the most comprehensive. It deals with the 30 years to now. It deals with the future plan. It deals with what hasn't been done and what needs to be done.
People are interested in the here.
No, and it covers that. It deals with LGBTQIA+. It deals with gender. It deals with youth. It deals with youth as a mainstreamed issue, but it also deals with youth in a specific matter. But I want to actually speak to coalitions, because it's very interesting what you're saying. The EFF is in coalition with the ANC in Ekurhuleni, so I mean, it's already happening.
It's not working very well.
But that's what I want to speak to, right? Coalitions need to be legislated. Right now, they're too unstable and they're unable to provide what they need to provide in terms of service delivery. The DA-led coalition in Tshwane the city of Tshwane is on the brink of collapse. They're about to be bankrupt, and I say this as the chair of COGTA in the province. So, unfortunately, coalitions haven't matured to where they need to be. And the reality is that a coalition on a national level may not be in the best interests of our people. Apart from it being whether it is the freedom of the people, of course, to vote in a coalition, that's a separate question. What I'm saying is that a coalition may not be the best for service delivery, because we're seeing more and more research-based studies that are showing that it's actually not producing service delivery outcomes. So what do we then do? There's actually a much broader conversation here amongst political parties that needs to happen around how we legislate to stabilize coalitions, to ensure that they get formed in a timeous fashion, to remove horse trading to the very best of our ability from the race. Because the reality now is when two parties sit, they're not saying we align on the LGBTQIA+ position. Let's go into a coalition for that. They're saying, I want to be this MMC, I want to be that MMC, therefore we'll form a coalition, instead of it being policy-based or service delivery-based. And that's something that we need to look at.
Ndipiwe, final word from yourself on coalitions. A coalition that is not led by the DA. I was with the UDM Bantoro Misa at the moment. The reason why he did not want to join the multi-party charter for South Africa is because of this idea that there will be a DA-led multi-party charter. He says, no, let's all go and see who's got the best skills and bring those people on board.
Yeah, thank you very much. We need to be aware and understand how coalitions work first and foremost. We are in coalition in Tshwane and other places. The DA always forms itself as an anchor tenant of that coalition, because we are aware that with our proven record of governance and our service delivery, we are indeed the anchor tenant that will be able to stabilize the coalitions. But we also need to be aware that coalitions that are formed based on positions and the horse trading that was alluded to are the coalitions that are led by the ANC, EFF and PA. The perfect example in the Knysna, a municipality that's about to completely collapse. It's been led by the ANC and the PA. They just refrain away from those type of coalitions that do not serve the interests of our people, but instead serve themselves. A coalition based, last year we were invited by the Deputy President of South Africa to the National Convention of Coalition Governments that looked at the framework of how to establish stable coalition governments. And these are the type of legislative things that need to be put in place to ensure that coalitions are formed timelessly as indicated, but above and beyond that, that we need to be aware that when we do form coalitions, that we form a coalition with like-minded political parties. This will assist us to be able to ensure the stability of the municipality, but to ensure that the members of the coalitions are not simply members of a coalition because they want positions and any other favors, but they have the right intentions in government. Coalitions have worked. It has worked in the city of Cape Town when the DA first took over the city of Cape Town, where we managed to turn around the city of Cape Town and work for the people. 2 days, the city of Cape Town is the best run metro in South Africa, and no one can go against that. It's a fact. It came from a coalition. The DA was an anchor tenant at that time, and currently the DA is in a position to be leading a coalition, a national coalition that will ensure that we rescue South Africa, that we ensure that we deliver services to our people beyond just rhetoric. For the past 30 years, we've been listening to the political rhetoric of the ANC with a lack of service delivery, with no implementation whatsoever. And I believe that as young people, we cannot be behind or supporting the ANC lip service anymore. Let's look at a party with a proven track record. Let's look at a party that knows how to rescue South Africa. And let's look at a party that actually delivers services and not a political party that stands in front of media outlets and newspapers, etc., and lies in the faces of young people and talk about all these nice things that they know they cannot deliver and they have not delivered in the past 30 years. The Democratic Alliance is the only party that can truly rescue South Africa, as we have done where we govern, as we continue to do where we are in coalitions, as we will do once we head into the union buildings.
Let's leave it there. Appreciate your time. Well, those are the young people. You make your decision. Are they going out to vote? I think these ones are definitely going out to vote.